Late spring in Pennsylvania is always a bit of a wild card. This year, April was unusually rainy and warm, which threw off my usual schedule. Typically, I don't have to break out the lawnmower until early to mid-May, but not this time. At least it's not snowing. Last year, we had a freak snowstorm in April that dumped 6 inches on us. So, if mowing the lawn a bit early is the price to pay for avoiding another late-season blizzard, I'm all for it. Plus, with tax season behind me, being outside in the sunshine felt like a well-earned reprieve. My house has a unique layout that I've always loved. The backyard slopes steeply downward toward a small creek and a patch of woods. When the house was built, they leveled the front yard off the road with backfill, creating a sharp slope about halfway down the side of the house. This design means the basement, fully enclosed at the front, opens up at the back. I took advantage of this by installing a bifold service door, perfect for storing the lawnmower and other garden equipment without cluttering up the garage. It's one of those small conveniences that make a big difference. I had just finished mowing the lawn and was putting everything back in its place. Being allergic to grass, I was eager to get upstairs and take a shower. But as I reached for the doorknob, I heard my wife's voice. I knew her friend was over. I'd seen her car parked out front while I was cutting the grass. What I didn't expect was the conversation that made me freeze in my tracks. Before I delve into what I overheard, let me introduce myself. My name is Robert Crane, though I usually go by Bob. Back in high school, my friends dubbed me Hogan, a nod to Robert Crane, the actor who played the lead role in Hogan's Heroes. I didn't mind the nickname, even though the show was off the air before I was born and hardly a current pop culture reference. After graduating from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in accounting, I carried that nickname with me, even if it no longer seemed as relevant. Standing there, half hidden behind the basement door, I strained to hear more clearly. What had started as a mundane afternoon chore was quickly turning into something far more unsettling. I earned my CPA degree in record time after graduation and quickly climbed the ranks at a prestigious firm in Philadelphia. As a team leader specializing in audits, my job might not be the most thrilling on the surface, but it pays handsomely and provides a fascinating glimpse into the inner workings of various companies. I have a knack for forensic analytics, piecing together financial trails to uncover fraud and money laundering schemes. This talent hasn't gone unnoticed. I've even been called in to advise the FBI on a couple of high-profile cases, establishing myself as something of an expert in the field. My wife, Kelly, was pursuing double majors in political science and business with plans for a law degree when we met at the start of freshman year. I vividly remember that moment. I was seated, waiting for class to begin, when she walked in. Kelly, with her tall, slender ballerina-like figure, caught everyone's eye. Her slightly larger breasts added a touch of sensuality to her graceful form. Her long, strawberry blonde hair cascaded over her bare shoulders, framing a vision of beauty in a sundress and sandals that highlighted her smooth, supple legs. The blend of innocence and allure was intoxicating, and I was struck by instant infatuation. Despite my immediate attraction, Kelly didn't sit next to me, nor were we paired for any group projects. It took me 4 weeks to muster the courage to approach her and break the ice. I cracked a silly joke, and to my relief, she laughed. A full, hearty laugh that wasn't just a giggle. We started chatting, and I finally asked if she'd like to grab coffee after class. "I've been waiting 4 weeks for you to ask," she replied with a smile that melted my heart. From that moment on, we were inseparable. During our last 2 years of college, we were rarely apart. Our parents had initial reservations, but when they saw our devotion, they came around. By our senior year, we were living together, and everything felt perfect. After graduation, I landed a job at one of Philadelphia's top accounting firms, making a salary that seemed absurdly high for a recent grad. Kelly got accepted into the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and we continued living in our student apartment. To top it off, my company offered to pay for my MBA, so I began taking classes as well. Life was on a golden trajectory. Kelly and I were building our dreams together, one step at a time. Little did I know, the perfect life we had meticulously crafted was about to face an unforeseen challenge. Standing at the basement door, overhearing the conversation upstairs, I felt the first tremor of what could be an upheaval in our carefully balanced world. I rode SEPTA to work every day, which meant I didn't need a car, keeping our expenses down. 3 years later, Kelly graduated, and I proposed to her during a celebratory dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. It was a night to remember, with the ambiance of the upscale steakhouse providing the perfect backdrop for my heartfelt proposal. 6 months later, we exchanged vows in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends, marking the beginning of our life together as husband and wife. Kelly landed a job as a deputy district attorney in the Bucks County Prosecutor's Office, located north of Philadelphia. We decided to buy a house in Doylestown, the county seat and home to the courthouse. The regional railroad line conveniently ended there, allowing me to take the train to work every day. Despite the 80-minute one-way commute, it was a preferable alternative to the congested Schuykill Expressway, also known as the Schuylkill Expressway, or I-90. Kelly and her mother found us the perfect starter home. It was a charming 3-bedroom house that fit all our needs. One of the bedrooms was converted into an office, complete with 2 desks, one for me to use when working from home and the other for Kelly's legal work. Another bedroom was designated as a guest room, ideal for hosting friends and family. Naturally, the last room was our master bedroom, our cozy retreat. The house was also conveniently close to her parents' place, which Kelly pointed out would be a great help when we started our family, providing a built-in nanny. Growing up as an only child, I had always yearned for siblings. Kelly and I had talked about having kids since our freshman year and had decided to wait until she was well established in her career before starting a family. Now that she had a solid footing in her job, we felt ready. Just 2 nights ago, we agreed it was time for Kelly to stop taking birth control and begin trying for a baby. I was over the moon, filled with a happiness I had never known before. But now, standing at the basement door, what I overheard made my hand pause on the doorknob. The joy and excitement I felt were suddenly overshadowed by a sinking feeling. The voices carried snippets of conversation that hinted at something I never expected to hear. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as the words from upstairs slowly pieced together a troubling picture. "Hogan and I have decided it's time for me to get pregnant," Kelly announced excitedly, her voice brimming with joy. Her friend Olivia Watkins matched her enthusiasm, and both women let out a high-pitched squeal that reminded me of beached whales calling for help on the Jersey Shore. Standing on the stairs, I couldn't help but smile at their shared excitement, feeling a surge of happiness at the thought of becoming a father. I reached for the doorknob again, but then I heard a question that wiped the grin off my face and drained the joy from my heart. "That's wonderful, Kel," Olivia said. "But what are you going to do about Paul?" "Paul?" Kelly's voice dropped to a hushed tone. "Shh, Hogan's outside mowing the lawn." There was a pause, and I imagined her scanning the room, ensuring I wasn't within earshot. My heart pounded as I strained to hear her next words. "I've already told Paul I was ending the affair. He was fine with it. With Grossman stepping down from his Senate seat, Paul thinks he has a real chance. Getting caught having an affair with a married staffer would be very ugly." 3 sentences. Just 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans was Kelly's boss at the DA's office. A widower in his early 40s, Paul had lost his wife Anne to breast cancer and was raising their daughter Barbara alone. Paul was a political animal, and Kelly often shared stories about his strategic maneuvers within his party. Now, I realized, those stories had a much more personal context. "Really?" Olivia teased. "Just going cold turkey? You've been hot and heavy for 6 months, and you're just going to give up on your muffin stud?" The playful doubt in Olivia's voice made me want to storm upstairs and confront her. Olivia had been a classmate of mine at Penn, and I thought she was my friend as well as Kelly's. But now I saw her in a different light. "Stop it," Kelly protested, giggling. "You're so bad. Paul is a wonderful lover, but it was just physical. I love Hogan, but Paul just took me and used me however he wanted. There was no love in it, just raw sex and power. Now that Bob and I are going to have a baby, I don't want to take any chances. I love Hogan, and I will be a good and faithful mother." How many more cliches are we going to breed here? I wondered bitterly. All that was missing was coming home to find an unfamiliar car in the driveway and catching them in our bed. I stood there, frozen in place, my mind reeling. The words that followed felt like knives cutting into my heart. The woman I loved, the woman I planned to start a family with, had betrayed me. She claimed she loved me, but the sincerity in her voice seemed hollow now, overshadowed by the raw confession of her affair. The irony of her calling me Hogan, a nickname from a character known for cunning plans, wasn't lost on me. I felt like a fool, played and discarded in the game she had been playing. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it fast. The idyllic life I thought I had was nothing but a facade, and I needed to confront Kelly. But as I stood there, a wave of anger and hurt washed over me. I knew this confrontation wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't ignore the truth I had just uncovered. It was time to face the reality of my marriage and decide what to do next. I wanted to burst into the room and scream. I wanted to trash everything around me, but my muscles were restrained by a paralyzing shock. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out rational thought. "So, cold turkey," Olivia probed. Kelly giggled again, the sound now grating to my ears. "Well, not really," she admitted. "I have a conference with Paul in Pittsburgh next week. We'll have our goodbye sex there. I'll miss the sex, but Hogan and the baby are more important." I couldn't take it anymore, but I still didn't know what to do. I loved Kelly, but this revelation was tearing me apart. I needed to step back and think. I needed a plan. Steeling myself, I started stomping up the stairs as if climbing a ladder out of a pit of despair. Then I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were sitting there, cups of tea in front of them. Was that a hint of guilt I saw flicker across Kelly's face? "Honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I realized tears were streaming down my cheeks. "Allergies," I mumbled. "It's going to be a bad spring." "Well, go upstairs and take a shower. Just drop those clothes by the bathroom and I'll wash them right away so they don't contaminate your closet. I bought you a new pack of Claritin D last week. It's in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks," I managed to say, heading for the stairs. I needed time to think. The next morning was Monday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to get up and out of the house before Kelly even stirred. The night before, I had retreated to bed early, claiming my allergies were making me miserable, when in reality, it was my emotions that were overwhelming me. Sitting on the train, I thought again about what I had overheard. On one hand, my wife had been unfaithful, but she was ending the affair to stay with me and start a family. Some might say I should be grateful she chose me in the end, planning to be a good wife and mother. However, a persistent voice in my head kept questioning, if she did it once, what's to stop her from doing it again in the future? 10 years from now, when the kids are in school, won't she be tempted to have another purely sexual affair? Then there was the prospect of divorce, with kids involved. Kelly would likely get custody, and I'd be left with a hefty alimony and child support bill. Being an accountant and business analyst, I had to think in terms of risk and reward. The emotional toll of staying in a marriage tainted by betrayal weighed heavily against the potential future stability of our family. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Something to protect myself, both emotionally and financially. I spent the rest of the train ride formulating my next steps, determined to take control of my life again. I found myself grappling with the same dilemma. My trust in Kelly was shattered, and her just sex excuse didn't address the real issue, the complete lack of respect for me. The cheater knows they are doing wrong and hurting their partner. Otherwise, they would be open about it. If Kelly had talked to me about her feelings, it would have shown some respect. But her secret affair with Paul proved how little she valued our relationship. As I worked that day, my mind was constantly churning over what I needed to do next. I had no tangible proof of the affair, just an overheard conversation. I hadn't noticed anything different in Kelly's behavior over the last 6 months. A direct confrontation without evidence would be risky and likely futile. Kelly and Paul Evans would deny everything. Taking the matter to court would be financial suicide, given Evans's connections. I would be buried in legal fees just to protect his reputation. Leaving and starting over was tempting, but the house would be an anchor. Kelly couldn't afford it on her salary, and we had little equity. Selling it would be necessary to avoid foreclosure, but the current market made that unlikely, potentially ruining both our credit histories. For a CPA, a bad credit history is a death sentence for career prospects. I needed undeniable proof before taking any action. 3 days later, I was still coming up empty. Her personal laptop was clean, no hidden email accounts, no secretive lingerie, no unexplained receipts, nothing. Then Kelly called me at work, excitedly telling me we were invited to Paul Evans' house for a political announcement party on Friday night. It was likely his announcement of a Senate run. I had my own high-profile announcement in mind, but still lacked the proof. We arrived at Evans' mansion near Washington Crossing just in time for the event. His property, complete with a small horse farm, was grandiose. A large tent was set up in the backyard for the guests, an opulent display that only added to my sense of dread. As we mingled with the crowd, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I watched Kelly as she flitted around, chatting and laughing with people, but my mind was fixated on uncovering the truth. I decided to stay vigilant, hoping for an opportunity. The party was in full swing when I noticed Paul pulling Kelly aside. They walked toward the stables, and I saw my chance. Slipping away from the crowd, I followed them at a distance, careful not to be seen. I moved closer, using the shadows to my advantage. Their conversation was hushed, but as I crept closer, I caught snippets. Paul's voice was low and intense. "This is our last time, Kelly. We can't risk it anymore." Kelly responded, her voice filled with emotion. "I know, Paul, but I can't help it. I'll miss this, miss us." My heart pounded in my chest. I had my proof. I pulled out my phone and discreetly recorded their conversation. The undeniable evidence of their affair was now in my hands. Returning to the party, I felt a mix of triumph and heartbreak. Kelly rejoined me, a forced smile on her face, but I saw the guilt in her eyes. I played along, waiting for the right moment. As Evans made his grand announcement, I stood by Kelly, my mind already plotting my next move. The time for confrontation was near, and this time I would be ready. And when we walked in, there he was, standing at the head of the receiving line like a self-appointed king, asshole Paul Evans himself. Being a widower, Evans didn't have a wife to play hostess, but he had apparently enlisted his 21-year-old daughter for the role. She stood next to her father, greeting the guests with the poise and grace of someone born to do so. When it was our turn, Evans' face lit up with a broad smile directed at Kelly. "Kelly, you did it! How wonderful!" He leaned in and kissed my wife chastely on the cheek, a gesture that made my blood boil. Then he turned to me with a smug expression. "Robert, it's good to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but I realize I'll have to give her up soon when you start expanding your family." He laughed at his own joke, a sound that grated on my nerves. "Just let me have her when you're done with her, and there will be no hard feelings." There was laughter from those around us, and Kelly even blushed a little, but all I wanted to do was wipe that smarmy grin off his face. I forced myself to take his hint in stride, though he obviously thought his innuendo had gone over my head. "Who knows what the future will bring?" I said in an even, neutral tone, neither hostile nor friendly, the same way I'd report the results of a difficult audit. Evan's smugness faltered for a split second, and Kelly elbowed me, muttering something about rudeness. He smoothly moved on to the next guest, leaving us in the presence of his daughter, Barbara. Kelly was incredibly attractive, but Barbara Evans was something else entirely. Even through my inner turmoil, I couldn't help but notice her striking beauty. With dark red hair and a brilliant smile, she reminded me of a young Maureen O'Hara. If Kelly looked like a busty ballerina, Barbara looked like she belonged on a pinup swimsuit calendar next to Kate Upton. She had that perfect combination of good looks, a healthy figure, radiant hair, and flawless skin that photographers dream of and often have to Photoshop to achieve. Paul Evans had the perfect triple threat political family. He seemed like the ideal wise statesman and family man. Losing his wife to cancer provided a tragic, sympathetic backstory. She was idolized, and any rival attacking him on a personal level was bound to commit career suicide. Barbara was a princess, a prom queen, a Penn State graduate majoring in business and law, a former gymnast, and now a member of the Penn State cheerleading squad. According to Kelly's gossip, Barbara planned to try out for the Eagles cheerleading squad at the next open competition, having just turned 21. With a late wife and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter, the press would adore him on the campaign trail. "Robert!" Barbara exclaimed excitedly, throwing her arms around me in a tight hug. It wasn't the polite hug of someone at a party. It was genuine, warm, and lingering. It was a full-body squeeze, and the parts of her that pressed against me felt a little too good. "You look great. No wonder Kelly has been hiding you. You never come to any of our parties. You shouldn't be working so hard. It's not healthy." Somehow, she managed to say it all in one breath, leaving me both flustered and confused. In an instant, my fury was replaced by shock. I stammered out a few polite remarks about how beautiful she looked and was about to excuse myself when it suddenly hit me. Barbara hadn't greeted Kelly at all. And what kind of parties was she talking about? Kelly didn't give me a chance to ponder as she rushed over to greet Barbara herself. We had no choice but to step aside for the next guests in line. As we moved to socialize, I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling Barbara's words had left me with. After buying my wife a drink, I asked casually, what kind of parties was Barbara talking about? Kelly only smiled and snorted contemptuously. She was just teasing, the little prankster. "Paul sometimes holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand, and at the bar, you never know who might be in the next booth. She's been home a few times when we've met here. Don't tell anyone, but Paul let her drink at home before she was 21. I pieced it together. The bastard had sex with my wife right in his house, under the guise of team meetings. They could even be real meetings, where Kelly was the last to leave. Or maybe she left first and came back after everyone else had gone. That way, no one on the legal team would wonder why Kelly always stayed behind to help the boss clean up. "So Barbara attends your team meetings?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Kelly waved the question away. "No, she's just been home a few times when classes were canceled. She's teasing her dad about throwing parties during work hours." She tugged on my arm. "Come on, honey, let's go treat your fiancé." For the next hour, Kelly didn't stray from my side. We chatted with a few of her coworkers, and many congratulated us on our plans to start a family, lamenting how much they would miss Kelly but expressing their happiness for us. Honestly, I was a little embarrassed. Why did all these people know about our plans? As I tried to process everything, a nagging question lingered. What else did Barbara know, and what else had Kelly been hiding? An hour later, Paul Evans called everyone to attention. His daughter stood beside him, beaming with pride. Paul began by thanking everyone for coming and then launched into the big announcement everyone had been anticipating. As expected, he declared his candidacy for the Senate, which elicited enthusiastic applause and cheers from the crowd. I noticed the publisher of the local newspaper and one of his reporters taking diligent notes. No doubt, tomorrow's paper would be filled with extensive coverage of the event. I won't bore you with the minutiae of the party. Under different circumstances, it might have been an enjoyable time, but with my heart shattered and my mind racing to find a way to prove Kelly's infidelity, it was anything but. About 90 minutes after the grand announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, approached and informed us that Paul wanted to meet with his staff. As an elected official, Paul depended heavily on Margaret, who was the senior staffer running the office. District attorneys could come and go every 4 years, but Margaret was a constant, a tough, respected figure in the legal community, known for her honesty and integrity. She was one of the reasons Kelly took the job. I liked her a lot. She and her husband, an electrician who supported her through college and now owned a successful electrical contracting company, had been married for over 30 years. They were a model of devotion, and I always thought of them as a template for Kelly and me. "Sorry for stealing your wife away from you, Hogan," Margaret offered with a sympathetic smile. "Paul wants to discuss office organization once he's done campaigning." A moment later, Kelly and Margaret were gone. Feeling the need to escape, I drifted away from the small cluster of spouses left behind and headed to the other side of the large pool opposite the patio where the party was in full swing. I found a wicker swing chair hanging from chains, tucked in the shade. People could see me if they looked closely, but I wouldn't be conspicuous. It was the perfect place to gather my thoughts. I had been sitting there for less than 5 minutes when a soft voice broke into my solitude. "So this is where you're hiding," it purred. I looked up to see Barbara lowering herself onto the wicker swing next to me. She had positioned herself facing me, her little black dress skimming her tanned thighs, clinging to her body in a way that hinted at the curves beneath but revealed nothing. Seductive yet innocent at the same time, she exuded a mix of allure and charm. "You look like a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders," she commented, her voice gentle and probing. The last thing I wanted was to discuss my turmoil with the daughter of my wife's lover, no matter how enticing she was. "We've been very busy at the office. There are a lot of inspections going on," I said, trying to end the conversation. "Really?" Barbara responded, feigning interest. "I just finished my last accounting course at school. We had several classes on the application of forensic accounting to law enforcement. I found it fascinating." Even in my grief, her genuine interest surprised me. "Really?" I asked, my tone tinged with incredulity. "Well, it's not sexy or anything, but it's really detective work to pick out all the details," I began to explain, almost despite myself. "You know, it's really about piecing together the right bits of information from a sea of irrelevant data to form a coherent picture. Plus, the fact that people are actively trying to hide this information makes it even more challenging," I admitted. Barbara's eyes sparkled with genuine interest, and she launched into an animated discussion about what she had learned in her class and why she found it so fascinating. I have to say, I was impressed. Many interns at my firm couldn't articulate the nuances of forensic accounting as well as she could. Focusing on our conversation helped me momentarily push aside the rage boiling within me. I found myself slipping into the role of a mentor, which provided a much-needed distraction from my emotional turmoil. "You really enjoyed that class, didn't you?" I remarked. "You seem to have a good grasp of the subject." Barbara blushed at the compliment. For a moment, she looked like a sweet girl who was genuinely touched by my praise. "I was actually thinking about joining the FBI after high school," she admitted. "Dad wants me to become a prosecutor or work at one of his friend's law firms. But I don't think that's what I want to do." "You should follow your dreams, not your father's," I advised honestly, not at all opposed to derailing her father's plans. "I've done a little work with the FBI when audits turned up criminal activity. Sharp people." Before Barbara could respond, Kelly emerged from the shadows. "So this is where you disappeared to," she said, her tone light but teasing. "You two weren't doing anything inappropriate, were you?" Barbara turned to face my wife, her smile radiant. "We were just talking about Bob's job. We discussed forensic accounting in class, and I wanted to get an expert's opinion." "Well, Hogan is the expert," Kelly said proudly. "I remember reading one of his audit reports where he discovered an employee embezzling money using his boss's login credentials. Hogan figured out that some of the transfers were happening when the boss was on a business trip, but the login was traced back to the corporate office. Most of us would have stopped once we identified the boss as the culprit. But Hogan kept digging. I could have gotten a conviction against that employee right out of law school. Hogan left the prosecutor's office with no chance of losing." Kelly looked at me with such pride that it embarrassed me. How could she claim to be proud of me and profess her love while having a 6-month affair with her boss? My confusion must have shown on my face because Kelly asked, "What's wrong, honey?" "Nothing," I replied, "just thinking about a problem." "Well, enough of that. It's a party," Kelly said, admonishingly. She took a deep breath and said, "Hogan, you'll never guess the opportunity that's come my way. Paul and Margaret want me to take over some administrative work since I plan to go on maternity leave soon. This way, when I leave, there won't be much work left to catch up on. I'll be working directly for Margaret." My heart sank at the thought of Kelly being away from Paul, but my hopes were dashed almost immediately. "I'll have to travel occasionally," Kelly continued. "I'll be delivering important documents to Paul during the campaign, so I won't be directly involved in his campaign, but I'll get to see some behind-the-scenes action. It's going to be a lot of fun," Kelly exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. My heart already fragile, felt like it was breaking all over again. Sure, I heard her say she was ending the affair so we could have a baby, but with all this anticipation of campaign contributions and the inevitable closeness that comes with working together, how could I trust her? What if she rekindles the affair? And if she does get pregnant, how would I know for sure the baby is mine? The thought made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. Now was not the time to confront her. Barbara and Kelly continued their animated conversation about the campaign, and I was momentarily forgotten. I took this opportunity to pull myself together. After tonight, I would begin to plan my next steps. I needed a strategy to counter Paul's political influence, but honestly, I had no idea where to start. The answer came to my office 2 days later. "Your 4 o'clock appointment is here," my assistant called out through the open door. I glanced at my Outlook calendar, but there was nothing scheduled. Before I could respond, she walked in. Barbara Evans. "Hi, Hogan," she greeted me cheerfully as she stepped into my office. Her long, dark red hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a light sundress that accentuated her legs and modestly covered her chest. The dress was supported by thin straps, leaving her arms bare. I was momentarily speechless as I watched her approach. "I hope you don't mind," Barbara began, closing my office door behind her. "I told your assistant we had an appointment to discuss my career and how Kelly works for my father." She smiled, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. I stood up politely, gesturing for her to take one of the chairs in front of my desk. "I'm glad to see you. I was just working on some reports," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "What did you want to talk about?" The cheerful demeanor she wore earlier vanished. "I think you know, Bob. I saw it in your face when you were talking to my father. I'm so sorry he destroyed such a good guy." I was taken aback by her bluntness. "What are you talking about?" I asked cautiously. Barbara grimaced. "The fact that the asshole known as my father is having an affair with your wife." I leaned back in my chair, shocked at how straightforward she was. "Did you just find out?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I'm sorry. How? When did you find out?" I asked, still reeling from her revelation. "About 3 months ago," Barbara admitted. "I don't know when it started, but I found out in February. One Friday, I went home early, and they were having one of their meetings at our house. I had plans with a high school friend, so I just ran in to drop off my stuff, say hello, and leave. Dad asked when I would be back, and I said after dinner. But my friend got sick and couldn't make it. So I grabbed a bite to eat and went home early. That's when I saw my dad and Kelly having sex in our hot tub. I took pictures of them and even made them run naked into the house." The bluntness of her words and the vividness of her description left me stunned. I didn't know whether to be grateful for the information or devastated by the confirmation. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, struggling to process everything. Barbara sighed. "Because you deserve to know the truth, and I want to help you. I can't stand what my father is doing. You seem like a good man, and Kelly deserves better than to be a pawn in his games. And you deserve to know who you're really married to." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate your honesty. I don't know what to do with this information yet, but thank you." She reached across the desk and placed a hand on mine. "You're welcome, Hogan. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this." As she left my office, I realized that I had found an unexpected ally in the most unlikely place. And with her help, I might just be able to expose Paul Evans and reclaim my life. There was a foot of snow on the ground. "You took pictures of your father having sex?" I asked in shock. My mind was already racing ahead, wondering if I could get copies of those pictures. They would be incredibly useful in a divorce. As if reading my mind, Barbara reached into her bag, pulled out a large envelope, and placed it on my desk. "Here are pictures from that day and a few others," she said, pausing to give a sly grin. "Dad installed a security system in the house. Everything is locked from the outside, and there are cameras in several rooms. If you know the website and have a key fob and password, you can access the house from almost anywhere. There's a thumb drive with videos on it." I was stunned by the revelation. Paul's daughter was handing me everything I needed to divorce him and ruin his career. "Why?" I asked, bewildered. The sad expression on Barbara's face was quickly replaced by one of anger. Because, she said in a low, intense voice, I hate that bastard more than you ever could. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. After a moment, she spoke again. Dad met Mom when she was in college. He was an aspiring attorney assigned to the sex crimes unit in Philadelphia. Mom had come from Ireland to study. Her family was well-to-do but died in the Londonderry bombing. She came here to escape the turmoil. Barbara's voice softened, taking on a lilting tone that must have come from her mother. Mom dated some loser who hit her so hard she ended up in the emergency room. Dad was assigned to the case. They met, the asshole went to jail, and a year later they were married. Dad was always ambitious. He got a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom got a strong man who would protect her. I showed up a few years later. Dad wanted me to do gymnastics. He thought his daughter's performance in the Olympics would do wonders for his political career. Barbara's expression darkened. You know how most gymnast careers end? She asked. I shook my head, feeling out of my depth. I never thought of that. Barbara smiled a little sadly. They call it the 3 Bs, boobs, butts, and boys. I got the first one. I was told to do cheerleading and be an all-American girl. I didn't mind. I loved performing. But by the time I was 16, I realized I was just a prop for my father's ambitions. She sighed deeply before continuing. Mom knew about his affairs almost from the beginning. Dad had been cheating almost from the moment they were married. Mom knew and begged him to stop, but she was too weak to do anything about it. She felt trapped. She was a devout Catholic, so divorce was out of the question. Barbara paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Sometimes I wonder if her poor response to cancer treatment was the result of her unconsciously wanting to die or actively sabotaging her treatment. Either way, I was with her in the hospital when she died. The official story is that my father was in court seeking a murder charge. He got the doctor to. Her voice trailed off, and she took a deep breath before continuing. The doctor to excuse him from being there at the end. He claimed it was too painful to see her suffer. The truth is, he was with another woman, just like he's with your wife now. Barbara's voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. I reached across the desk, squeezing her shoulder gently. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. I'm sorry for what you had to go through. And she wiped her eyes and straightened up, a look of fierce determination replacing the vulnerability. You deserve to know the truth, and I want to help you. We need to bring him down. He can't keep getting away with this. I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Let's do it, I agreed. Let's make sure he pays for everything he's done. Barbara's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Together, we would take down Paul Evans and reclaim our lives from the wreckage he had caused, to change the time of death. He was actually banging his assistant in her apartment to celebrate. He just paraded my mom around as his trophy, and the press adored the story of how they met. Heroic prosecutor rescues a battered woman. Hell, the bastard even beat her himself more than once, from what I've seen. Why are you telling me all this? I had to ask. Because you don't deserve this, Hogan. My father, he's not a very nice man. After my mom died, he hid his affairs until I left for college. Then he started having these meetings at the house. And they're not just for work. He also hosts meetings for some of the charity groups he's involved with. I know for a fact that he sleeps with at least 2 other women from these groups. One of the poor women actually thinks it's true love and is going to leave her husband. Does Kelly think so? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Barbara shook her head. No, she seems to think it's just fun. They say power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Kelly seems to be proof of that. I heard her talking to Daddy about some senator they were meeting and how excited she was when she got back to Doylestown. I flinched at her bluntness. I even remembered that day. Kelly had come home like a wild woman, and it had been one of the best nights of sex in my life. That cherished memory was now tainted because I knew my wife probably wasn't even thinking about me at that moment. So what do you want? I asked. To her credit, Barbara looked me straight in the eye as she answered, I want you to dissolve your marriage to that cheater. I want my father's career ruined to the point where he'll never be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. I thought about just sending my stuff to the papers or even the other side, but he has too many friends. I think together we can make them pay. Won't it be harder for you to finish school? She shook her red hair again. No, my mom left me her inheritance as a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if I needed to, I could pay for the rest of my tuition and my MBA, and I'd have a pretty good margin left. If your mom had so much money, why didn't she take you and leave? She could have gone to Ireland or wherever your father couldn't find her. Barbara wrinkled her nose. As I said, she was raised Irish Catholic. She was taught that divorce was not an option. No matter what happened, Mom held on to her faith to the very end. That's the only thing that makes me think her death was unconscious rather than intentional, since they also consider suicide to be the unpardonable sin. I have to admit, I couldn't see anything but the truth in Barbara. She wanted to destroy her father's career, and my having that information didn't bode well for his ambitions. I couldn't imagine this could be some kind of trap. If Kelly and Paul wanted to wipe me off the face of the earth, they could do it openly in court. That kind of despicable shit was only appropriate if they were desperate. Like me, a plan began to form in my head. I would need Barbara's help with a few things. All right, Barbara, let's do this, but we'll need to be careful. Your father is a powerful man, and we need to be strategic. Barbara's eyes lit up with determination. Agreed. We'll make sure they both pay for what they've done, and we'll do it right. I'll miss you, she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I love you, Hogan. I turned my head slightly and forced a smile, hiding the turmoil within. I love you too, Kel. Have a good trip. She kissed my cheek and walked out the door, leaving me to the emptiness of our home and the chaos in my mind. Once her car disappeared down the street, I set my coffee mug down and went to the office where Barbara and I had set up our little operation. Barbara was already there, having let herself in with the spare key I'd given her. She was seated at the desk, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple monitors displaying streams of data from Paul's computers. She glanced up as I entered, her expression serious and determined. Everything's set, she said. The keystroke logger is working perfectly, and the security footage is being uploaded as we speak. Good, I replied, taking a seat beside her. Let's see what we can find. Over the next several hours, we pored over financial records, emails, and videos, looking for any hint of corruption or illicit activity. Paul's arrogance was his downfall. He hadn't bothered to cover his tracks very well, assuming no one would dare to challenge him. Look at this, Barbara said, pointing to a series of transactions in Paul's campaign funds. Large sums of money being funneled to shell companies. This screams money laundering. I leaned closer, scanning the data. You're right, this is exactly what we need. Barbara's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It's my friend who works at the DA's office. She's heard rumors that Paul is planning to announce a major campaign fundraising event next week. It would be the perfect time to expose him. A plan began to take shape in my mind. We need to make sure this goes public in a way that leaves no room for doubt. If we can get this information to the right people, it will destroy his career. Barbara nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. I'll reach out to a contact I have at the local news station. She's always looking for a big scoop, and this could be it. We spent the next few days meticulously compiling evidence, creating a dossier that detailed Paul's illegal activities. Barbara's contact at the news station was thrilled to get the exclusive, promising to run the story as soon as we gave the green light. On the day of Paul's fundraising event, Barbara and I waited nervously by the phone, watching the live feed from the news station. As the anchor began to speak, detailing the allegations against Paul, a sense of vindication washed over me. The camera cut to Paul's shocked face as he watched his career crumble before his eyes. Kelly called me later that evening, her voice trembling. Hogan, have you seen the news? Paul's been exposed. His career is over. I took a deep breath, trying to sound as calm as possible. Yes, I've seen it. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I don't know what to say. Everything's falling apart. You should come home, Kelly, I said quietly. We need to talk. When she arrived, the look on her face was one of confusion and fear. We sat down in the living room, and I handed her the dossier. I know about everything, Kelly. The affair, Paul's illegal activities, All of it. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the extent of what I knew. Hogan, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I loved you, Kelly, I said, my voice breaking. But I can't live with someone I can't trust. I want a divorce. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. As she packed her bags, Barbara arrived to help me gather my things. We watched silently as Kelly drove away, leaving behind the life we'd built together. Are you okay? Barbara asked, her voice gentle. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. I will be, thanks to you, Barbara. She smiled, her hand resting on my shoulder. We're a team, Hogan. We'll get through this together. And as we stood there, watching the sun set on the horizon, I realized that while one chapter of my life had ended, a new one was just beginning. To my ear. I hope you're feeling better so we can start on the baby, she whispered, her voice a tantalizing mix of hope and desire. Her scent enveloped me, transporting me back to the days when our love was pure and uncomplicated. It almost brought tears to my eyes, but I managed to keep my composure. I'll ice it so it heals faster, I assured her, stroking her arm gently and planting a tender kiss on her forehead. She sighed softly, leaning into me. She moaned. I wish I didn't have to go to this conference. It would be so much better to just stay home with you and be naked all weekend. You can always tell Evans that something more important came up, I suggested, my tone carrying an edge I couldn't quite conceal. She looked at me, puzzled by my sudden shift. What's your problem with Paul? She asked, genuinely bewildered. First, you were rude at the party, and now you sound like you hate the man. Taking a deep breath, I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Honestly, I've seen too many hotheads like Evans who think they're untouchable. They strut around, selling the illusion of power, getting people to buy into it. Remember that mayor in South Carolina last year? Thought he was invincible, embezzling city funds while sleeping with 3 married women. Now he's in federal prison for 10 years, and they're all divorced and publicly humiliated. I have the same feeling about Evans. If he makes it to D.C., he'll be banging clueless interns within a week. But eventually, his wheels will come off, and when they do, his shit will splatter everywhere. Kelly stared at me, stunned. She had heard me rant about such people before, but she'd never connected Evans to them. Perhaps I should have kept my mouth shut, but it felt good to release some of the bitterness. Despite everything, I still loved her, even if I could never trust her again. Hogan, that's a terrible thing to say about Paul, Kelly protested. He's a good man who's done a lot for the people of this county. He's not like that. Her voice had an almost pleading quality, as if trying to convince herself as much as me. Right on cue, a car horn honked from outside. Paul had arrived. Kelly sighed in disappointment, glancing at me with a mix of regret and fear. I'll be home in 4 days, she said in a conciliatory tone. Then we can talk about it. But be ready, love. We need to start working on that baby. She wrapped her arms around me, kissing me passionately. I returned the kiss with equal fervor. Have a good week, she exhaled. I love you. I love you too, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She picked up her bag and opened the front door. Bye, darling, she called over her shoulder. Goodbye, Kelly, I said, closing the door behind her. 30 minutes later, I was on the train heading into the city. Barbara and I had an appointment with the FBI. As it turned out, I didn't need to manufacture any evidence. Paul's embezzlement skills were mediocre at best. Barbara and I met at her off-campus apartment to go through the documents she had retrieved from his computer. By my calculations, he had about $2 million stashed away in an offshore account. That was the amount he had transferred, but whether it was still there was uncertain because those records weren't included. Most of the transactions were standard procedure for someone trying to hide ill-gotten gains, but it was enough to start a firestorm that would consume Paul's career. With a deep breath, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. It was time to bring down the man who had destroyed my marriage and nearly ruined my life. This money came from various small donors who wouldn't raise suspicion with the IRS. But why were people from out of state donating to the DA's campaign? I was able to trace a few of them to defendants who had their cases dismissed or received unusually lenient plea bargains. Barbara discovered the biggest bombshell. Turns out she wasn't an only child. Evans had fathered children with two other women. One child was born 3 years before his wife died, to one of his employees at the time. The third child was born 8 months after his wife's death to an 18-year-old volunteer at the hospital where his wife was being treated. Evans had been transferring $2,000 a month from campaign contributions to each woman under the guise of paying them as poll research consultants. Barbara was furious, almost destroying her own apartment in her rage. Her fiery red hair seemed like a fitting warning sign of the storm within her. By the time Kelly and Paul left for their conference, we had pieced together a substantial amount of incriminating evidence from Paul's notes. There were still some gaps, but we didn't have the resources to fill them just yet. I documented all our findings and arranged a meeting with a senior FBI agent I had worked with in the Philadelphia office. Barbara accompanied me to explain our story. She testified that after taking a forensic accounting course, she became curious about her father's records. When she noticed some irregularities, she called me because my wife worked for her father, and she knew of my experience in forensic accounting. Gary, the FBI agent, was a seasoned professional. He knew there was more to the story, but he didn't push us for details. We had handed him a gift-wrapped case, a corrupt prosecutor running for the U.S. Senate. This case was career-making material, and he knew it. We caught a cab back to Barbara's apartment since she had late classes, and I walked to the 30th Street station to catch the train home. I was already planning my next steps, knowing that I needed to be packed and ready to leave by the time Kelly returned. Gary promised to expedite the investigation and subpoena Evans' records by Wednesday. It was unlikely that word of the investigation would leak before then. Once the rats started abandoning Evans' sinking ship, he would realize how fragile his supposed power was. Kelly called me while I was on the train. She mentioned they were going out for a big dinner and that she would be back to her room very late. I knew she had no intention of staying in her room that night. I made some vague, distracted comments, which she noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "I just had a meeting with FBI agents about a case," I replied. "I'm on the train, and the investigation is still ongoing, so I can't talk about it." "Sounds serious," Kelly said, intrigued. "Can you give me a little hint?" "This story is going to be huge," I said. "It will probably make national news when everything comes out." "Really?" she asked, sounding both intrigued and nervous. "Can't you give me a little more detail?" "Sorry, Kelly," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't discuss it. Just know that it's big and it's going to change a lot of things." I hung up, feeling a mix of satisfaction and dread. The next few days were going to be crucial. I had to stay focused and make sure everything went according to plan. I couldn't help myself. Criminal politician, bribes, money laundering, sex, adultery, children, typical summer romance. Anyone I know?" Kelly inquired with a playful smirk. I grimaced. "I've already said too much. If I say anything else, the Bureau will shut me down." "Oh, you're no fun to be with," Kelly pouted, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Don't worry, honey. Your secret is safe with me." We said our goodbyes, and she left. As I walked into the house, the reality of my situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My marriage was over. We had been together for 10 years, through dating and marriage. I never expected to face the prospect of being single again, but here I was. Eventually, I just sat on the couch, watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, feeling as if my life was fading away with it. It was many hours after sunset before I stirred again. By Saturday afternoon, I snapped out of my fit of self-pity. I'm not saying I didn't deserve some indulgence, but I knew I needed to get moving. Ironically, I was mowing the lawn again when a BMW convertible pulled into my driveway. I stopped the mower and watched as Barbara stepped out of the car. The first thing I noticed was her long, pale legs extending gracefully from the driver's side. She wore sandals with thin laces wrapped around her calves, reminiscent of ancient Greek styles. As she stood up, I could see her sculpted legs flex, revealing the strength beneath her smooth skin. She was dressed in a pure white dress that looked like a toga, ending mid-thigh with 2 inches of lace at the bottom, offering tantalizing glimpses of her upper thighs. The light, silky material hugged her curves and was intentionally translucent, revealing the outline of a bikini underneath. Her arms were bare, adorned only with light freckles, and the dress slipped over one shoulder, leaving the other bare. Her long red hair cascaded in waves over her shoulders. However, it was her gray-green eyes and captivating smile that truly caught my attention as she approached. I turned off the engine and gave her a mock salute. "Well, you're looking better than I expected," Barbara said with a grin. "I half expected to have to pull you out of a bottle or down from a ledge." I snorted. "Those thoughts crossed my mind last night," I admitted, "but mowing the lawn helps. It distracts me." "Not seeing a lawyer?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I shrugged. "I did that on Tuesday before Kelly even left. The paperwork will be ready on Monday. I arranged an audit at a client in Austin and leave on Tuesday. Usually these business trips last 3 days, and then I work remotely until the report is done. This time, I'll be there for 3 weeks." I shrugged again. "Maybe it's the coward's way out, but I don't want to be here when everything goes down." Barbara nodded in agreement, understanding the need for distance. "I'm glad you're thinking ahead," she said. "That's what you're good at." Her smile widened. "Now I've got a plan too." "Here's my plan," Barbara announced. "I'm going to help you finish your work here, and then you're coming to my place. We'll have some fun, and you can ogle me all you want. It's a win-win." I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine sound that felt good. "Sounds like a plan," I said, feeling a bit lighter. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. "I have a swimsuit you'll just love." The last part was said in a voice that could have raised even a dead man. I tried to rally. "Barbara, I'm still married," I protested, "and I don't think I'll be ready for anything else for a while." "You need to blow off some steam before you explode," the sexy red-headed girl insisted. "Besides, you know the old saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander." Her gaze was playful, sly, and guileless all at the same time. I couldn't help but laugh. By one of those bizarre coincidences that prove truth is stranger than fiction, we ran into Olivia, of all people. After finishing up my yard work, I cleaned up and we headed out for a late lunch at a nice restaurant. I wasn't really looking for revenge sex, but it was nice to get out of the house. And going on a date with a woman as nice as Barbara, and who looked just like Barbara, wouldn't be difficult at all. As I pulled up to the restaurant, I noticed a car parked a little closer to it. It was Olivia's car. I always thought it was a crime to put OBX and Jersey Shore bumper stickers on a Mustang GT. I almost told Barbara to turn around and we'd find another place. But I didn't. Instead, I did something completely out of character. It was all done on a whim. After all my careful planning, something inside me just exploded when I saw Olivia's car parked in that lot. I nonchalantly put my arm around the red-headed beauty and ushered her into the restaurant without further ado. I tipped the host to seat us at a particular table. It was somewhat shaded, but it was in plain view when we returned from the restroom. I seated Barbara facing outward and settled myself next to her. She smiled when I took her hand. "What brought this on?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Not that I'm complaining." I laughed. "Remember when I told you about how I found out about my wife cheating on me? Her friend Olivia? Well, her car is parked right down the street." Barbara broke into a throaty laugh. "So I'm going to be the other woman? Ooh, I can live with that." She leaned forward and planted an incredibly tender kiss on my lips. It wasn't a deep, passionate kiss, but rather a kiss that hinted and promised that there was more to come. A lover's kiss. The food arrived, and I frankly enjoyed myself. The tricks were forgotten while I enjoyed Barbara's company. Her keen sense of humor was killing me. I had never heard accounting sound so dirty before. I happened to glance over and noticed Olivia walk past us. I pointed her out to Barbara. "Oh, that feels good," she giggled. "I've been looking forward to this." With those words, she leaned forward to kiss me. I ran my hand under the table along her leg. The skin of her thighs was so incredibly soft, and underneath hid firm, supple muscles. The touch was electric. I could feel the heat coming from her panties. My hand slid forward on its own to feel the moisture. I was so immersed in the sensation that I was surprised when I heard Olivia yelling at me. "Hogan, what the hell are you doing?" she shouted at me. "Who is this tramp?" I looked up, still caught in the heat of the moment. Olivia's face was a mix of shock and fury. Her eyes darted between Barbara and me, trying to make sense of the scene. Barbara, ever the composed one, turned to Olivia with a sweet, innocent smile. "Hi, I'm Barbara," she said, extending her hand as if they were meeting at a formal event. "And you must be Olivia. Hogan's told me so much about you." Olivia ignored the hand and glared at me. "You cheating bastard! How could you do this to Kelly?" Barbara's smile never wavered. "Funny you should mention cheating," she said lightly. "Isn't it ironic how life works out?" I felt a surge of pride mixed with the adrenaline of the confrontation. "Olivia, if you want to talk about betrayal, maybe we should discuss how you helped Kelly cover up her affair with Evans. So please, spare me the righteous indignation." Olivia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Barbara squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Come on, Hogan, let's enjoy our meal," she said, turning her attention back to me. "Olivia can join us if she wants, but somehow I doubt she's in the mood." Olivia shot us one last venomous look before storming out of the restaurant. Barbara and I shared a conspiratorial smile, the tension of the moment dissolving into shared triumph. As we settled back into our meal, Barbara's foot brushed against mine under the table. "So, what's next?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in a long time. "Next, we finish what we started, and then we make sure that everyone gets what they deserve." Barbara raised her glass in a toast, and I clinked mine against hers. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was back in control. "Hitting on your wife while she's out of town? I thought better of you." Olivia's voice cut through the restaurant like a knife, and I had no doubt the whole place heard her. I let go of Barbara and turned to face my former friend. "What's your problem, Liv?" I asked calmly, masking the turmoil inside. "It's just a little carefree sex before Kelly and I settle down and have a baby." Olivia's eyes widened, and she stared at me as if I had hit her with a dead fish. "What?" she stammered, unable to process my words. "Come on, Liv. Kelly's doing the same thing. I'm sure she's having sex with her boss right now. Has been for months now, so I decided it was only fair that I have sex with the boss's adult daughter." I could see the shock ripple through Olivia as she processed what I said. Her face turned a pale shade of white, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Meanwhile, Barbara started to giggle beside me, and I squeezed her lightly to keep her quiet. Unfortunately, I kind of forgot where my hand was, so her giggle turned into a moan of pleasure. "You know about," Olivia began, her voice trailing off in disbelief. "I know I'm supposed to be the faithful husband who doesn't realize anything while my wife is running around and being helped by a woman I considered a close friend." The contempt in my voice was palpable, and Olivia winced. "I know Kelly wanted one last taste of excitement before having a baby. Kind of like that last fling before the wedding. If that was okay for her, what's your problem with me?" I had no concrete evidence that Kelly had any affairs before Paul, but as the saying goes, once a cheater, always a cheater. I decided to press Olivia to see if she would confirm my suspicions. "You know about that too?" she sighed, a resigned look on her face. "No, but thanks for the confirmation," I replied, watching Olivia turn pale at the realization of her mistake. "Go away, Olivia," I said firmly. She turned and quickly disappeared behind the tables, clearly rattled. A few minutes later, we heard the door of the restaurant open and close, signaling Olivia's departure. "Well, it was fun while it lasted," Barbara said with a slight chuckle. I really wish she'd stayed longer. Her smile made me blush. "You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now," she added. "Probably," I agreed. "I'm giving her 5 minutes before my phone goes off. However, if she leaves right now, it will be 5 hours to get home from Pittsburgh. That would give us time for dessert and give me enough time to get home and pack. Too bad I won't get to see you in a bikini like you promised." Barbara laughed again. "Oh, I guess we can do this another time." She reached up to grab my shirt and pull me closer. "You know my semester ends in a week and a half," she whispered in my ear. "I've always wanted to see Austin." I barely caught her words before her tongue slipped into my ear. Epilogue. Yeah, that's really the shit hitting the fan. Kelly started calling me 10 minutes after Olivia left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her messages, and she was furious that I had cheated on her. It almost made me laugh. After an hour of her messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she would eventually just call from another phone, but she was driving back from Pittsburgh, so she couldn't just ask to borrow someone's phone on the turnpike. I went home and packed my bags, feeling a strange sense of liberation. The sun was setting as I finished, casting a warm glow over the house that had once been filled with love and laughter. I took one last look around before heading out the door. It was time for a new beginning. Kind of person who believed in doing the right thing. She had a strong sense of justice, and I appreciated her reaching out. My move to Austin went smoothly. The client audit was straightforward, and I quickly settled into the rhythm of work. The distraction was welcome, allowing me to bury myself in spreadsheets and financial statements. Yet the evenings were long and lonely, filled with thoughts of what might have been. Barbara and I stayed in touch, and she was a lifeline through this turbulent time. Her fiery spirit and humor kept me grounded. She filled me in on the continuing fallout back in Doylestown. Paul's arrest had turned into a full-blown scandal, with reporters digging up every bit of dirt they could find. Kelly was caught in the middle, and her once promising career lay in tatters. One night, about 2 weeks after I had left, Barbara called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Guess what, Hogan? The FBI just finished raiding Paul's house. They found more evidence of his corruption than even we anticipated. The media's having a field day." I couldn't help but smile. It felt good to know that justice was being served, even if it came with a heavy personal cost. "That's good to hear, Barbara. Thanks for keeping me in the loop." "Right, by the way," she added, her tone softening, "I'm thinking about coming to Austin for a visit. I could use a break from all this madness. What do you think?" The idea of seeing Barbara again was more appealing than I cared to admit. "I'd like that," I said, feeling a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A week later, Barbara arrived in Austin. Seeing her walk through the airport with that confident stride and radiant smile made my heart skip a beat. We spent the weekend exploring the city, laughing, and talking about everything except the past few months. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my temporary apartment, watching the sun set over the Austin skyline, Barbara turned to me, her eyes serious. "Hogan, I know this is all new and complicated, but I really like being with you. You make me feel safe and understood. I think we could have something special." I looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and warmth there. "I feel the same way, Barbara. This past month has been a whirlwind, but you've been my anchor. I want to see where this can go." She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. "Then let's take it one day at a time. No rush, no pressure, just us." And so we did. The weeks turned into months, and our bond grew stronger. The pain of betrayal and the chaos of the past slowly faded, replaced by the comfort of a new beginning. I found a permanent place in Austin and started to build a life there, one that included Barbara. Kelly and Paul became distant memories, their scandal a cautionary tale rather than a daily torment. I heard through the grapevine that Kelly had moved back in with her parents, trying to piece her life back together. As for Paul, he was facing a long list of charges and a very uncertain future. As the seasons changed, so did I. I learned to let go of the bitterness and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. With Barbara by my side, I discovered that even after the darkest storm, the sun could shine again. And as we walked hand in hand through the vibrant streets of Austin, I knew I had found not just a new beginning, but a chance at true happiness. A mess of financial misdeeds, but also some deep-rooted corruption that extended beyond Paul's initial offenses. This newfound recognition brought a slew of opportunities my way. Clients and colleagues alike began to see me as a top-tier forensic accountant, and my consulting business took off. Meanwhile, Barbara and I continued to grow closer. She moved to Austin, and we began a new chapter together. We found comfort in each other's company, our shared experiences forging a bond that felt unbreakable. We navigated the complexities of our pasts together, finding strength in our ability to support and understand each other. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges, but we faced them head-on. Barbara's insights into the legal and political world complemented my expertise in forensic accounting, making us a formidable team. We often discussed cases and ideas, our professional and personal lives intertwined in a way that felt natural and fulfilling. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the Texas sun dip below the horizon, Barbara turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Hogan, I've been thinking. We should start a consulting firm together. Your skills in forensic accounting and my legal background could make us an unstoppable force. What do you think?" The idea was intriguing. The thought of combining our talents to help others while building something together was incredibly appealing. "I think that's a fantastic idea, Barbara. Let's do it." And so, we did. Our consulting firm quickly gained a reputation for excellence. We took on cases that required deep dives into financial records and legal intricacies, uncovering fraud, embezzlement, and corruption with precision and dedication. Our partnership flourished both professionally and personally, and we found a rhythm that worked perfectly for us. Life moved forward, and we continued to build our future together. The shadows of our pasts receded, replaced by the bright promise of what lay ahead. We often looked back at how far we'd come, marveling at the twists and turns that had brought us to this point. On a warm summer evening, as we sat on that same porch, Barbara turned to me, her eyes shining with happiness. "You know, Hogan, despite everything we've been through, I wouldn't change a thing. It's all led us to this moment, right here, right now." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I feel the same way, Barbara. We've built something amazing together, and I can't wait to see what the future holds." Our journey had been anything but ordinary, filled with unexpected challenges and incredible triumphs. But through it all, we had found each other and created a life that was richer and more meaningful than we could have ever imagined. And as we sat there, watching the stars twinkle above, we knew that whatever came next, we would face it together, side by side. Not only did I uncover the primary embezzler, but I also exposed a second embezzler that they had no prior knowledge of. My firm was so impressed that they promoted me and put me in charge of the white-collar crime team. Of course, some joker couldn't resist labeling the team Hogan's Heroes, a nod to my high school nickname. The best part of this new role was that they assigned me an assistant, a recent college graduate eager to gain experience in forensic accounting. Working late hours had never been so enjoyable. Barbara, my assistant, was not only brilliant, but also brought a refreshing energy to the office. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and our teamwork quickly became the talk of the firm. Our professional relationship soon blossomed into something more. We spent long evenings poring over complex financial records, our bond growing stronger with each breakthrough. The late nights in the office transitioned to dinners and eventually much more personal encounters. One evening, after a particularly challenging case was successfully closed, we decided to celebrate. We returned to my hotel room, where the bikini she had teased about looked even better on the floor. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter for us, both professionally and personally. Barbara and I continued to thrive as a team. Her insights and fresh perspective complemented my experience perfectly. Together, we tackled some of the most challenging cases, gaining recognition and respect from our peers. Our firm saw the results of our synergy and showered us with praise and more significant responsibilities. As time went on, our relationship deepened. We discovered that we shared more than just a passion for forensic accounting. Our dreams and ambitions aligned seamlessly, making our bond even stronger. We were a dynamic duo, not just in the office, but in every aspect of our lives. Looking back, the twists and turns that led me here seemed almost surreal. The betrayal, the heartbreak, and the subsequent discovery of true partnership and love were all part of a journey that had shaped me into a better, more resilient person. Barbara had become an integral part of my life, and together we faced the future with unshakable confidence and unwavering support for each other.